Hello, you're clingy today. Wish you would keep your tail to yourself. You are so invasive with your tail. Hey everybody, welcome back. So today, I thought we would look at trauma and hauntings because something I have often said about myself is it feels like I'm haunting myself. And that I do have experiences outside of that, like my boyfriend hears or sees as well. So it's both of us, and I have like a contributing source, so I know like it's not just me. But it really got me thinking. So today I want to look at mental health, specifically the trauma scale. There are other conditions that could fall into this very easily, but I don't want to look at them today because I specifically want to look at trauma. So with that being said, let's jump over and have a look at I'm this monitoring today. Let's have a look at what are the symptoms of a haunting. So grab a drink and I will see you in a second. Okay, so these are the symptoms of a haunting by Mr. Zach Baggins himself in his Ghost Hunting for Dummies book. So let's have a look. Unexplained drops in temperature, most likely a draft. So I'm just going to focus in on the ones that we could attribute to mental health. But also, drops in temperature could be, like, you know when you get a hot flush, it could be that. It could be your body's internal temperature regulation. Just like, obviously if you can see it on a thermometer, it's not you. But outside of that, it could be your body's internal regulation. Electrical glitches, which phone's ringing, flickering lights, television turns on and off, and more. One, electricity can just be a bit flickery sometimes, especially if there's like bad weather wherever you get your power from. But some of this could fall into auditory hallucination territory, like the phone ringing. I mean, some of this could even fall into visual hallucinations, because just because you see the lights flicker doesn't mean that they did. Unusual smells. This could fall into sensory flashbacks again. I can't. What's the one when you smell something? I don't know. I can't think of that off the top of my head. But you can smell things in flashbacks. Movement of objects. If you start seeing doors open or close, or notice that things seem to disappear from one part of your house only to show up in another unrelated spot, you might have a ghost. You also might have amnesia. It could be you. Can range from normal forgetting, which everybody has, slightly more problematic levels of forgetfulness due to dissociation, and then proper full-on amnesia with some of the more severe disorders that we're going to talk about today. I do want to mention everybody falls somewhere on this trauma scale. Every single person has had at least one traumatic experience, and now what is traumatic for one person may not be traumatic for somebody else. Traumatic could be dropping your ice cream in a puddle when you're a child, and now you're really fearful of that happening again. It's like, I have never once dropped my phone off the edge of a bridge, but if I'm near any sheer drop, my phone is as far back as it. I'm not losing my phone. And that is partly like a primal response, but it's a trauma response from having things that I really care about taken away from me suddenly. So everybody has trauma on some level, and you're just as capable of drowning in the ocean as you are as drowning in a puddle. You're just as dead. So I'm not getting into a trauma debate here. I'm not getting into a who had it worse. I'm not getting into you have to have this level of trauma to be valid. None of that. We're not doing any of that here today. I'm just pointing this stuff out. Unidentifiable sounds, clomping sounds of boots on staircases, footsteps going up and down hallways, disembodied voices, all of this falls into auditory hallucination territory. Odd behaviours from your pets. I mean, pets are like children. They are very, very sensitive to the energy in the air, and they will react to you on a subconscious level. So even if you think you're fine, if something is slightly off, like inside, or you're having a flashback and you don't realise, because you can, have flashbacks and not realise. Or, you know, here it says dogs are known to foresee imminent earthquakes, tornadoes, blah blah blah. Not just dogs, just animals in general. If the animals are ever acting weird in an area, I am leaving, because I'm not getting natural disastered on purpose. But yeah, like, even my animals will act very differently around me depending on where I am emotionally. Like, sometimes the aloof one, Kari, will cling to me, and that's when I know that I'm really not okay, because she will like come stick to my side, and she's a I will spend time with you but on the other side of the bed sort of cat. So if she's stuck to me, I'm not good. Okay, anything else? Feelings of a nearby presence, again, flashbacks. Sensations of being touched, flashbacks. Seeing shadows of movement, flashbacks. Or visual hallucinations. Feelings of depression and sadness. If you have PTSD on any level, you're gonna have that. Okay, cool. Nothing else of note there. Should I make a list? Let's make a list. Okay, now we've got our list from the man himself. Let's start with PTSD. So let's start at the bottom of the scale, shall we? So, what is PTSD? I'm sure most people do know what PTSD is, but let's mansplain for a bit. PTSD is a mental health condition that some develop after they experience or witness a traumatic event. The traumatic event may be life-threatening or pose a significant threat to your physical, emotional, or spiritual well-being. PTSD affects people of all ages. People with PTSD have intense and intrusive thoughts and feelings related to the experience that last long after the event. PTSD involves stress responses like anxiety, depressed mood, so we've hit depression already, and feelings of guilt or shame, having flashbacks or nightmares, avoiding situations, places, and activities related to the traumatic event. Yeah, I don't like that list. That's very not inclusive. There are two types of conditions closely related to PTSD, which is acute stress disorder. This is a short-term mental health condition that can occur within the first month after experiencing a traumatic event. Symptoms lasting longer than 4 weeks may also meet the criteria for PTSD. And then we go into complex PTSD, which we will look at in a minute. And PTSD is common. It develops in about 5 to 10% of people who experience trauma, which is a lot. If we compare that, I think the amount of people who have red hair is somewhere between 1 and 3%, just as like a rough comparison. Symptoms: flashbacks of the traumatic event, which can be very vivid and feel real. Avoidance: avoiding reminders of the traumatic event, like people, places, activities, things, and situations. Avoiding remembering or thinking about the traumatic event. Avoiding talking about what happened or how you feel about it. Changes in thinking and mood. Ongoing fear, horror, anger, guilt, or shame. Memory loss of important aspects of the traumatic event. Ongoing negative or distorted thoughts and feelings about yourself and others. Hi, baby. Hi. I'm okay, you know. Yeah. Your tail's in the way. Can we move your tail? Thank you. Feeling detached from others. No longer enjoying activities you once did. Being unable to experience positive emotions. I have a cat in the way. Changes in arousal and reactivity. Irritability and angry outbursts. Reckless or self-destructive behaviour. Being overly watchful of your surroundings. Hypervigilance. Being easily startled. And problems concentrating or sleeping. Now, hypervigilance is important because that is the one that will feed into... Hypervigilance is when you're so on alert, you're so switched on and all the time. You cannot turn it off. And you're listening for any minute sound and you're looking for any minute detail. You are just like braced, and even if you're not aware you're doing this, you are braced and you are waiting for the attack. And also a lot of like paranormal investigators will feel hypervigilant when they're out investigating, especially if they're doing something like abandoned, because you're like you're switched on because you need to be scanning for like other people. Do I need to get out? You're constantly listening for human responses as well as potential paranormal phenomena. And now let's look at cPTSD. So complex PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is a mental health condition that can develop if you experience chronic long-term trauma. It involves stress responses such as anxiety, having flashbacks or nightmares, avoiding situations, places, and other things related to the traumatic event, heightened emotional responses such as impulsivity or aggressiveness, persistent difficulties in sustaining relationships. And then examples of chronic trauma include long-term child, physical or word I'm not saying, SA, long-term DV, trafficking or frequent CV. While cPTSD is often associated with chronic trauma in childhood, adults who experience chronic trauma can also develop the condition. Experts across the field of psychology disagree on cPTSD as a distinct condition on diagnosis. It's in the ISD-11, but it's not in the DSM-5. And then the two diagnostic manuals should be in the DSM-5, but you know. Some experts believe that cPTSD, PTSD, and BPD may exist on a spectrum of trauma-related mental health conditions that vary with severity and of their symptoms. There's also at least 2 disorders that should be on that list, but we'll get to that. And I also agree with those experts. Trauma is a scale. What's the difference between cPTSD and PTSD? The main difference is the length of trauma and the symptoms. Traditionally, experts thought PTSD generally developed from short-term trauma such as a vehicle accident or natural disaster. With research, they realised that people who experience long-term repeated trauma tend to have other symptoms in addition to the symptoms of PTSD. Both cPTSD and PTSD involve symptoms of psychological and behaviour stress responses such as flashbacks, hypervigilance, and efforts to avoid distressing reminders of the traumatic event. People with cPTSD typically have additional symptoms including chronic and extensive issues with emotional regulation, identity and sense of self, and relationships. As cPTSD is a newer diagnosis, research is lacking on how common it is, but experts estimate that it may affect 1 to 8% of the world's population. So that is approximately 82 million to 656 million people have cPTSD. Realistically, it's more than this. The symptoms, according to the ICD-11, complex PTSD includes most of the core symptoms of PTSD, such as flashbacks, avoidance and detachment from people, events and emotional triggers of the trauma, excessive attention to the possibility of danger, which is hypervigilance, frequent and negative thoughts and emotions, and in addition they have excessive reactivity to negative emotional stimuli with anger and aggressive behaviour, negative sense of self involving persistent feelings of shame, guilt, failure and worthlessness, and severe difficulty in forming and maintaining meaningful relationships. Traumatic stress can change your brain's chemistry and structure. This is important. Studies suggest that trauma is associated with permanent changes in key areas of your brain, including your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes fear and other emotions, the hippocampus, the part of your brain largely responsible for learning and memory, and the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's involved in executive functions such as planning, decision-making, personality expression, and controlling social behaviour. Some neuroimaging studies show that brain changes are more severe in people with cPTSD compared to people with PTSD. Okay, so if trauma changes your brain structure, as it says here, that also lends itself to the fact that some hauntings could be part of your own psyche. So let's keep going. Just quickly, I do want to say that just because somebody has one of these disorders doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean they have absolutely no control over themselves, and it doesn't mean that they can go around hurting other people. There's a lot of stigma with trauma and dissociative disorders and things like BPD and DID and conditions of that severity. A lot of the time people with these conditions can be more problematic because they have a lot of hurt and pain and avoidance and survival mechanisms baked into them. But that doesn't mean that every single person with these conditions is like that. If people want to do the work, they can live successful lives with any of these conditions, and they can do the work to get into remission for all of these conditions. But not everybody has to go into remission. The goal is not to cure the condition and make it go away, but to live a successful life and work with it. I don't want this video to be adding, hello, you're clingy today, to be adding to the stigma of anybody with any of these conditions. Wish you would keep your tail to yourself. You are so invasive with your tail. I just wanted to, see, and this is unusual behaviour for Kari. She has just laid down on my desk in front of me. And this is also what I mean about pet strange behaviour. This is very unusual for Kari. And she's doing it because I do find delving into this stuff difficult. I used to have a mental health channel. I deleted it because it went very badly for me when I was going through my custody battle. It got dragged up through court and it got used against me. So I just deleted it and I was done with YouTube. So this is difficult for me. But I really, really wanted to make this video. So Kari is being very out of character and she's being my emotional support kitty right now. Look at her. Look. Adorable. So what is borderline personality disorder? BPD is a mental health condition marked by extreme mood fluctuations, instability in interpersonal relationships and impulsivity. People with BPD have an intense fear of abandonment and have trouble regulating their emotions, especially anger. They also intend to show impulsive and dangerous behaviours such as reckless driving and threatening self-harm. All of these behaviours make it difficult for them to maintain relationships. BPD is one of a group of conditions called Cluster B personality disorders, which involve dramatic and erratic behaviours. Personality disorders are chronic long-term dysfunctional behaviour patterns that are inflexible, prevalent and lead to social issues and distress. Many people who live with borderline personality disorder don't know that they have it or may not realise there are healthier ways to behave and relate to others. I personally hate how that is written. That is written as very derogatory and stigmatising towards BPD. There are other cluster B conditions which I didn't immediately think of, so that is my bad. And I and my psychologist, my trauma psychologist, are both of the opinion that personality disorders are trauma disorders. So there are 4 personality disorders in cluster B, and they include antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder. So antisocial personality disorder describes a pattern of behaviour in which an individual regularly violates the physical or emotional rights of others, behaves recklessly, violently or deceitfully, and lacks remorse for any harm caused to others. It is estimated prevalence rate of about 0.2 to 3.3%, so that's still quite high. We've looked at borderline, let's have a look at histrionic. People with histrionic personality disorder are self-centered, constantly attention-seek, may behave or dress in inappropriate or seductive ways. They are highly dramatic and may display extreme emotions in public, often creating relationship problems as a result. The disorder is thought to affect approximately 2% of the population. Okay, and then narcissistic personality disorder is thought to affect anywhere between 1 and 6% of the population. I think we can think of a few world leaders that fit, and is characterised by grandiosity, a need for excessive admiration, a lack of empathy, and manipulative, self-centered or demanding behaviour. Someone with NPD can cause significant distress for anyone who associates with them. Also, with narcissism, it's very much a buzzword right now. It's being thrown around for anybody that's just even a little bit toxic. That's not the case. If you have come into contact with a true narcissist, you will know. And it's not just somebody being a bit of an arsehole. And a lot of the time, the narcissist doesn't get diagnosed because 1, they don't seek help, and 2, they are so good at manipulating the narrative that they can manipulate their mental health team into thinking that they're the victim. So it's probably more than 1 to 6. And I also want to say you can have any of these conditions, this is reversed. So like, I'm pointing at the screen right now, but I'm not on the camera. So you can have any of these conditions and still have perfectly healthy relationships, a perfectly healthy life. Just because you have this predisposition in your brain doesn't mean you can't work with it and not do those behaviors. You can definitely work on them. It's just communication at the end of the day. And that is very, very difficult. And being that vulnerable is very, very hard, but it is possible. I do know of people who have turned their conditions around, gone into remission, and have done the hard work to not be a toxic person. And I also know people without these conditions who are very toxic people and just don't care. So your diagnosis really doesn't mean anything in how you navigate society. Symptoms: fear of abandonment, unstable intense relationships, unstable self-image or presence of self, rapid mood changes, impulsive and dangerous behaviour, repeated self-harm or self-unaliving behaviour, persistent feelings of emptiness, anger management issues, and temporary paranoid thoughts, which include dissociative episodes, paranoid thoughts, and sometimes hallucinations may be triggered by extreme stress, usually fear of abandonment. These symptoms are temporary and usually not severe enough to be considered a separate disorder, but they do happen. And now we step up again to this one, dissociative identity disorder, but there is a middle step which Cleveland Clinic decided to just completely ignore. I have linked the ISSTD, which is the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation, if anybody wants to have a look. But if we come over to the Clinic DS, which stands for the Clinic of Dissociative Studies, we can see that we have in the levels of dissociation, because we just touched on dissociation with BPD, so you do have dissociative. BPD is technically a dissociative disorder. Technically any trauma disorder is a dissociative disorder, and technically everybody experiences dissociation. Now, dissociation can range from highway hypnosis, which is where you just go on autopilot, you're driving a familiar route and you realise you don't remember going through about 3 roundabouts and 2 traffic lights, and you're just like, shit, how did I get here? Did I run a red light? Am I okay? Because you just went onto autopilot and or you're watching TV and 3 hours have gone past and you're just like, shit, where did that time go? That's normal levels of dissociation. Then when you start getting into PTSD, the reason you have flashbacks is because you're dissociating. You're not in the now. You're not present now. You're flashbacking to the past. So that in itself is dissociation. But we have different forms. We have dissociative amnesia, which is the inability to recall autobiographic information, usually of a traumatic or stressful nature, that is inconsistent with ordinary forgetting. The symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or important areas of functioning. The disturbance is not attributed, basically it's not substance abuse, and it's not like a brain condition or something. And the disturbance is not better explained by dissociative identity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder, somatic symptom disorder, or major or mild neurocognitive disorder. Dissociative fugue is defined as a subtype of dissociative amnesia under the DSM-5. A fugue state occurs when there is a sudden and unexpected travel away from home or work in combination with amnesia for the past, and either identity confusion or assumption of a new identity. This is basically a dissociative fugue is you end up somewhere different and you don't know how you got there. So say I had a dissociative fugue episode. I'm not saying that I do, but if I did, I could get up right now and go walk 10 minutes, 5 miles, doesn't really matter. But I do not remember leaving my desk. I am at my desk and then I'm wherever I end up, and I don't know how I got there. But I did it, I just don't remember. That's what a dissociative fugue is. Or it could be, I'm still sat here, but it's now 6 p.m. instead of 2 p.m. and I'm like, I have nothing. I blinked and it's 4 hours. I have no idea what I've been doing for those 4 hours. Well, fugue is more travel, but dissociative amnesia and fugue states sort of intertwine. Then you have depersonalization and derealization. This is characterized by clinically significant, persistent or recurrent feelings of depersonalization, derealization, or both as prominent symptoms. Depersonalization is the feeling of being detached or disconnected from one's body and or mental or emotional processes. People often describe feeling unreal or numb, like an outside observer in their own life, or having out-of-body experiences. They may even feel like they don't have a body, whilst logically knowing that they do. Out-of-body experiences, where have we heard that one before? Derealization includes feelings of unreality or detachment from the environment and or people in it, sometimes described as living in a fog or being behind a screen. There may be an inability to recognize places and people that should be familiar, and sensory distortions, such as narrowed field of view, seeing things as smaller or bigger than they actually are, or sounds feeling either heightened or muted. Hypersensitivity to sensory stimuli is common in people with severe trauma. I have experienced both of these. Yeah, like colours would feel desaturated and everything would be like too far away. So like, you know when you just slightly zoom out on a camera and it's just barely noticeable, but there is a difference. It was like that. Or I would be like, I was watching over my left shoulder. So I'd feel like I was standing behind my own shoulder and watching the world. It was, yeah, it's not a nice experience, but what am I going to do? Stop my whole life because that's happening? No, I've got shit to do. I'm just going to carry on. And then we have OSDD, which is the disorder that the Cleveland Clinic completely ignored. And this diagnosis applies to presentations in which dissociative symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in important areas of functioning, but do not meet the full criteria for any of the other dissociative disorders. Example presentations include the following: chronic and recurrent syndromes of mixed dissociative symptoms, identity disturbance due to prolonged and intensive coercive persuasion, acute dissociative reactions to stressful events, and dissociative trance. I've often seen OSDD. There are different forms of OSDD, but I'm not going to get too into that because it's not necessary for this video. But I have seen OSDD be described as like DID, but not quite. So like it's nearly DID, but you're missing a couple of the important key diagnostic, or one or a couple of the key diagnostic components. Then we have DID, the presence of two or more distinct identities or personality states, each with its own relatively enduring pattern of perceiving, related to and thinking about the environment and self. The occurrence of amnesia, defined as gaps in recall of everyday events, important personal information and or traumatic events. The person must be distressed by the disorder to have trouble functioning in one or more major life areas because of it. The disturbance is not part of normal cultural or religious practices, and the symptoms are not due to direct physiological. And it's not due to substance abuse or other medical conditions. And then we have somatoform dissociation. People with severe trauma histories can sometimes experience multiple medically unexplained physical problems and disturbances in perception, sensation and control. These may include episodes of paralysis, temporary loss of sight or hearing, medically unexplained seizures, chronic pain syndromes, and severe headaches with no clear medical explanation. These can come and go and sometimes be associated with specific identities only, leading to disbelief and confusion in professionals. However, these experiences are very real to the person who experiences them and are not within their control. So, now we've got that one out of the way. The symptoms of DID include having at least two identities or personality state. These affect your behaviour, memory, self-perception and way of thinking. Amnesia or gaps in memory regarding daily activities, personal information and traumatic events. Different identities affect your ability to function in social situations or at work, home or school. Other mental health symptoms that can but not always be found alongside DID is anxiety, delusions, depression, self-harm, substance use disorder, or thoughts about unaliving. What does a person with DID feel like? If you have DID, you might feel or experience the following: detached from your reality, your emotions and your sense of self, confused by what others may tell you about your behaviour, frustrated about your gaps in your memory, stressed about not being in control, and feel like a bystander watching yourself from the outside. It doesn't feel like you're you with DID. This can look and feel different for each person who experiences it. If something doesn't feel right, or your experiences and memories aren't lining up, reach out. Can someone have DID without knowing it? Yes, it's possible someone can have DID without knowing. While some people are aware of their identities, many people don't know when a new identity takes over. When a new identity steps in, you may not remember some events because another personality experienced them. This causes gaps in memory called amnesia. Don't like that they're calling them personalities, because DID used to be thought of as a personality disorder, but then in like 1996 or something, they updated it to a dissociative disorder, and that's when they changed the name, because it used to be called multiple personality disorder and it's not anymore. And it hasn't for a long time, yet people can still call it that. With DID, it's not that you have like different people in your head, it is that your own consciousness is just separated. Because what happens is when you're a child, you have like different ego states. You have like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need this, I need that, and they're all separate. And then which is why kids have such violent mood swings. But when you grow up, they're supposed to all integrate together and be like one whole cohesive self, which is why you have like a work self and a home self and a clubbing self and a library self and a book club self and a wife self and a mum self, and you have all these different self states, but you're all one person. With DID, you don't have this cohesive self state. They're all separate, and there's no limit to how many alters or parts or whatever term you want to use they can have. A lot of the time people with DID can get more if they go through like a very traumatic experience, and as I said, trauma is subjective, and especially if you're already severely traumatized, even having a flashback to the past could be enough, or having a memory that you had amnesia with is enough to cause that disruption. And they can have parts that are a lot more complex than that. I don't want to get too deep into it because it's not relevant particularly. I don't like this misinformation, so I'm trying to correct it. So, for example, you could have a part that handles daily life. They're the person that goes out to work. That's it. And then you have another part for socializing, and then you have another part for cooking, and you have another part for showering, that sort of thing. But then you get other people with DID who are like, one part does absolutely everything and then the other parts only come out in therapy. Or you have other people with DID who all the parts do everything. It's whoever has the baton that day, I don't know, it just goes and does the life stuff. It very much depends on the person, just like any other condition. Yeah, it just no. I had to correct the BPD, I had to correct that. I had to tell you about OSDD because the Cleveland Clinic decided not to. Causes is just trauma, specifically childhood trauma. You can read that if you would like to. I don't think YouTube would particularly like me if I did that. All of these will be linked anyway. Okay, so let's look at flashbacks. Okay, so we already know about PTSD. We know about most, if not all, of the main trauma disorders that come along with PTSD. So we have emotional flashbacks. Emotional flashbacks are sudden and intense feelings of fear, sadness, or anger that are triggered by a reminder of the traumatic event. These flashbacks do not necessarily involve visual or auditory memories, but rather they are a re-experiencing of emotions felt during the trauma. Emotional flashbacks can be especially challenging to manage because they may not be immediately recognised as being related to the traumatic event. I think emotional flashbacks are my most common form of flashback, and I'll just be sitting here be like, I really do not feel okay right now. Why am I so sad? Or why am I stressed? Why do I feel like I'm going to cry? And it's because I'm having emotional flashbacks. It's great fun. Sensory flashbacks. Sensory flashbacks involve the re-experiencing of physical sensations such as pain, touch, or smell that were present during the traumatic event. These flashbacks can be triggered by specific sensory inputs such as a particular sound or scent, which may not be consciously recognised as being related to the trauma. Visual, I'm going to read the whole thing and then we'll look at our list. Visual flashbacks. Visual flashbacks are vivid and detailed mental images of the traumatic event. These flashbacks can feel like the person is reliving the traumatic experience, and they may include sights, sounds, or even smells associated with the event. Visual flashbacks can be particularly distressing due to their immersive nature. Dissociative flashbacks. Dissociative flashbacks occur when a person feels disconnected from their current reality and experiences a complete reliving of the traumatic event. These flashbacks can be so intense that the person may feel as though they are actually back in the situation. Dissociative flashbacks can be accompanied by a temporary loss of awareness of one's surroundings and a sense of disorientation. Okay, the different types of flashbacks experienced. Visual flashbacks can range from brief glimpses to feeling like you're fully reliving the experience. Auditory flashbacks are hearing sounds associated with the trauma. This may include voices, screams, explosions, or other noises from the event. Olfactory flashbacks, that was the word I was looking for. Smelling odours related to the traumatic experience and can be triggered by similar scents present in the environment. Somatic flashbacks. Physical sensations reminiscent of the trauma may include pain, pressure, or other bodily feelings experienced during the event. Emotional flashbacks. Suddenly experiencing intense emotions connected to the trauma, often accompanied by a sense of reliving the emotional state of the past. Tactile flashbacks. Feeling physical sensations on the skin or body related to the trauma may include the sensation of being touched or grabbed. Taste flashbacks. Less common, but can involve experiencing tastes associated with the traumatic event. Combination flashbacks. Many flashbacks involve multiple senses simultaneously and can create a more intense and immersive re-experiencing of the trauma. So I wanted to go through this because as someone who experiences flashbacks from 26 years of a word I can't say, beginning with an A, I feel like I have some ground to talk about this, and these lists always make it seem so over the top. And it can be, it most definitely can be, but not always. You can have flashbacks and not know that you're having them. You can see a glimpse of something out the corner of your eye and it makes you filled with panic. You can smell something that you don't even register as being connected to the event. Like maybe somebody was smoking outside while the event was happening and you didn't know that, but subconsciously somewhere your brain has connected the trauma to the smoke, and then you smell smoke and you feel that deep plunging feeling of something's wrong, something's here. It can be as subtle as I feel like I'm being watched, or it could be I swear that door moved. My point is, it can be really difficult to detect sometimes, and with how avoidant the society is in terms of trauma and not being okay, and I know we have this whole movement of it's okay to not be okay, and it's all very well and good to say that in practice, but that doesn't make it true within society. The second you become an inconvenience to literally anybody, you are dismissed and villainized. It's okay to not be okay as long as your symptoms are cute and not invasive, but the second you act out of impulse or anger or anything else out of your control, you're a problem and you need to fix that. That's not okay. And yes, on some level it's not okay, but people with severe trauma need boundaries, but they also need grace. If they're not working on it, then that's on them. But if they are actively working on it and trying to heal and trying to get better, then they deserve some slack. But also, being traumatized is not an excuse to go out and hurt people. So this was our list, and I personally cannot see anything on this list that cannot be attributed to a flashback, especially when all of your senses come online or all of these senses can come online to give you these experiences. I can see how a lot of these symptoms could be taken completely out of context, like an emotional shift, like a mood swing, or a shift in your dissociation levels, or even a switch in identity if you have DID, could all be perceived as spiritual, or from outside of yourself, or a ghost, or a demon, or a presence. I can very easily see how that could be construed. Now, I do have one of these conditions. I'm not going to say which one, but I do have one of them. And I myself, in the very early days, was convinced I was possessed. And I didn't know what to do with it. And then I went down this whole spiritual rabbit hole. And I'm somewhat confident in my belief systems now. I'm more of a theorist rather than I have a concrete belief system. I love a theory, whether that's fiction or real world. But it is very, very easy from someone who's done it to misattribute real psychological symptoms as spiritual. So with all of this, I'm not saying that every single supernatural, paranormal, whatever experience is 100% definitely your own imagination or your own psyche. It can be, it's another option, but it's not definitely. I'm not sure how much. I did read basically everything on those web pages. I don't know how much of that I'm going to keep in because I don't want it to get like too bogged down and boring with somewhat irrelevant information. But if you want to know more about any of these disorders, they will all be linked down below. And if you think you may have any one of these disorders or any other disorder, please go see a doctor. Please go get help. If you are really, really struggling with something, it is okay. And you don't have to be. You are worthy of help. You are worthy of that care. You are worthy of somebody to listen. But what do you think in terms of trauma and ghosts? Do you think there's any merit to anything that we looked at today, or do you think it's just a bunch of crap and ghosts are ghosts and it's not a projection of your psyche in any format? I'd be really interested to know what you think, and with that I think I'm going to leave you to the rest of your day now, and I will see you next time. Bye.